on, everybody? Welcome to another MLB Live Before Lock, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching me on shows. I did the NBA strategy show earlier today on MLB Live Before Lock. Then I'm going to be doing NBA Live Before Lock with Eric, and then the playback show as well. So I'm going to be talking about this baseball slate, and also kind of excited to talk about the one-game basketball slate in a little bit. As you guys are watching, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are sponsored by Better today. If you guys want to sign up and get yourself a little bit of a deposit bonus, sign up using the link that we have below, because that's one of the easiest ways to build your bankroll in the DFS and betting space. Is you sign up in new sites, you take advantage of these deposit offers. It's a good way to get some extra money in your pocket when you start playing on these new sites. We got a really interesting slate to break down here, Matt, where we've got this Braves Cubs game where the wind is going to be blowing out. We've currently got, 30-mile-per-hour winds blowing out to left center field, which as a result, the total is insanely high in this game. The ownership even higher. Do you have any general thoughts on that before we start breaking down the slate and looking over some of the pitchers for today?
Yeah, this could be one of those spots where like the Braves aren't high enough owned, no matter how high owned they are, considering everything that's surrounding the weather. Assad has been really good, but his underlings aren't nearly as good. So surely before the slate, you can make cases to get off them. But when it's all said and done, this could potentially be one of the top weather games we see all year. So, yeah, really tough to get away from both sides here.
It's been a minute since we've seen one of these games at Wrigley. I don't remember any of them happening this year. I don't even know how many of them there were last year off the top of my head, but it's something we've seen a good amount of in the past. Is when you get this extreme wind weather at Wrigley Field, it just leads to so many home runs. So you just got this situation with a spot that I'm finding very, very difficult to avoid in large field tournaments. We'll talk more about it as we go here now. But I mean, I was telling you before the show, just kind of playing around with the contest generator in the Sims. I was kind of curious. I was like, what happens if I just double the ownership? Because I was getting to just infinity amount of the Braves. So I was wondering, like, what if I just double the ownership? Just force the contest generator to really boost the ownership on the Braves and just see what that does as far as what the Sims say. And it was still under on. Like, there was nothing I could do that made it not love the Atlanta Braves for today. So it's certainly something that's going to be interesting. And it's also going to inform a lot of the pitcher ownership too, because as we look at the pitchers here on the slate, man, we're going to, as per usual, talk about the high end pitchers. But I almost think with the way this slate is, just from a ownership projection standpoint, we kind of have to start by talking about some of these cheap guys instead of the expensive guys, because I can't remember a slate where we've had such shitty pitchers be this popular, because with everybody wanting to jam the Atlanta and Cubs game, you get to a scenario where Cal Quantrill is projected for 29% ownership. Aaron Brooks projected for 33% ownership. I know relatively easy matchups for these pitchers, and they're pitching against each other. The game is taking place in Oakland. So Cal Quantrill pitching on the road against the A's, Aaron Brooks pitching at home against the Rockies. Let's go inverse and start at the bottom and work our way up, Matt, because this is, to me, the most interesting talking point at pitching. What do you make of Aaron Brooks and Cal Quantrill being super, super chalky tonight?
I certainly understand it because of what you said. Great matchups, the best weather ballpark combination game on the slate. Two bad offenses. But I wrote about this in my Contrarian article today. Very rarely do you see a guy who the field is going out of their way to stack against, which was Houston on the last slate Brooks pitched, to now Brooks being like one of, if not the most popular pitcher on the slate. He's not good. It doesn't mean that he can't be good tonight. Certainly he was good last time out. He wasn't amazing, but he was good enough. We've seen this with like Simeon, Woods, Richardson, guys that weren't good in the minors, somehow get up here and pitch better. But as bad as the Rockies are, they're better than a minor league offense. Getting Chris Bryant back tonight for whatever that's worth. And this is just, I'm just not on Aaron Brooks myself. I feel similarly about Quantrill, but I do expect Brooks to be higher owned. And I just don't see it. Like, again, I understand it, but it's not for me.
Yeah, in large field tournaments, I mean, it's reasonable to me to be getting to these guys, and it allows you to pay up to the expensive bats. Single entry, I'm looking to go elsewhere with my pitching, though, and this is where it kind of gets interesting, because there's all different ways that we could approach single entry. Do we want to pay up for pitching and then maybe go less expensive at hitting and really deviate from the field who is going to be jamming the Atlanta Braves? Or Matt, is there somebody that you're seeing on the cheap end of pitching that stands out to you as a pivot off of Aaron Brooks and Cal Quantrill? Is there somebody you like getting to that isn't getting ownership that has a value price point attached to them?
I do not. No, I think I'll build differently tonight and go back to our boy Crochet, who's underowned. How about you?
So on the low end, at least as far as in single entry, the answer is no. In large field tournaments, I do have 10% of Griffin Canning, which I really don't feel great about. It's a terrible matchup for him. The Astros offense, it is well and alive again. I don't think it's exactly the same, but I actually played a good amount of Ryan Weathers yesterday against a really chalky Brewers team. And I think that was like the only reason I ended up being profitable yesterday. And it's not exactly the same scenario with Griffin Canning, but there's only so many ways to make a Brave stack different in large field tournaments. And to me, one of the more reasonable ways to do it is you pair them with Griffin Canning, because if you're playing a Brave stack and you're playing Aaron Brooks and/or Cal Quantrill, that's kind of what everybody in the field is going to be doing as well. So if I'm really committed to playing the Braves in large field tournaments, which I am, I have to find other ways to be different, because it can't just be play Aaron Brooks, play Cal Quantrill. And I do have ownership in my top 150 lineups about comparable to the field on them, but there are other ways that I'm making those lineups unique. And that is by doing stuff like mixing in Griffin Canning, which once again, I don't feel good about. I don't feel good about Ryan Weathers yesterday either, but I think these are the levers I kind of have to pull to be different with the Braves stack. And for single entry, we'll talk more about it, whether you want to play the Braves or not. But if you were playing a Braves stack, would it be Griffin Canning you potentially go to at pitcher, or maybe somebody else in the scenario where you were playing a Brave stack and had to be somewhat different at pitcher?
I don't think it's Canning for me, but all your points make a ton of sense. I slightly like Brandon Pfaadt and even Casey Mize a little bit more. I think all three of those guys are lumped together, and Canning is the cheapest. So I have no arguments with that. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's not even about Pfaadt, Mize, or Canning for me. It's about them not being Brooks or Quantrill.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you look at the slate at first, and I don't know where you started by looking at the slate, but I actually did start by looking at the pitcher ownership this morning. And my first thought was, what the hell is going on this slate that Aaron Brooks is 33% owned and Cal Quantrill also right around 30%. And then you look at the offense, it's like, okay, I kind of understand what's going on here. But that's where also I'm kind of looking at potentially Griffin Canning, even Casey Mize at 3% projected ownership against the Royals. Also, don't love Casey Mize, but I think at 3% owned, a little bit underowned. And that's just an easy way to differentiate a Brave stack. But anything else you want to talk about as far as the cheap value pitchers are concerned?
Mm-mm.
All right, so let's get into the mid-range then. And let's talk about, I know you mentioned Brandon Pfaadt being somebody you have a little bit of interest in. Let's look at all the pitchers who are, let's say, $7,500 to $8,100, because none of these pitchers are projected for ownership. 2% to Alec Marsh, 1% to Javier Assad, who I can't believe he's 7,700 in this matchup against the Braves with a total of a gazillion runs. So nobody's playing him. We've got Gavin Stone, 4% owned. Charlie Morton, 4% owned in a matchup against the Chicago Cubs. Also that bad weather game. So all these pitchers are really low owned. Do any of them stand out to you in any kind of way, or do we just want to go and talk about the more expensive pitchers?
I have no interest in any of these guys. I don't know if you see it differently.
I do not. Let me see. My top 150 lineups, I have 2% exposure to Charlie Morton. That's it. That's all I've got in this price range. So pretty easy for me to say no, not anything that I really have all that much interest in as far as this price range is concerned. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the other popular pitchers on the slate. And that's where we start to get to Clark Schmidt. We start to talk about Yusei Kikuchi, because when we start to talk about the $8,400 and more expensive pitchers, Matt, Clark Schmidt is 39% owned at $8,400 at home against the Seattle Mariners. And then we've got Yusei Kikuchi at $9,300, projected for 33% ownership. So these are your two chalky pitchers that are not at a value price point. What do you make of Clark Schmidt and Kikuchi at their ownership? We'll start with Clark Schmidt. He's the most popular pitcher on the slate, nearly 40% owned. Is that ownership number too high, too low, or just about right in your opinion?
Definitely too high, and he's going to come in even higher owned than that, in my opinion. Now, that being said, I get it. Like, there aren't good pitching options on this slate. And as Lofty and I have discussed a bunch recently, like insert right-handed pitcher against Seattle here. They're striking out a ton. I don't think they're going to strike out as much going forward as they have to start the season, but it's kind of nitpicking. So I think he's way too high owned for who he is, coming off one of the best starts of his career. Now gets Seattle at home. Again, I get it, just like I get the Brooks and Quantrill ownership. It's just way too high when there's better pitchers on the slate in my mind.
Yeah, I don't really have too much of an issue with the Schmidt ownership. I'm around the field on it, but I actually do land on Yusei Kikuchi being my most rostered pitcher on the entire slate. I do think the ownership should be flipped on Clark Schmidt and Yusei Kikuchi. I think Kikuchi should be a little bit more popular, Clark Schmidt a little bit less popular. Kikuchi is under the radar, been one of the best pitchers in the American League this year, and all of the metrics indicate that it's more or less justified. Guy's got a 2.6 ERA, 2.74 expected ERA, 2.61 FIP. His strikeout rate is sitting at 26.3%. His walk rate, a career low, 4.8%. He's got a great matchup here against the Chicago White Sox. I know we've seen a lot of high-end pitchers really get hit around as of late, and Yusei Kikuchi is not somebody we typically think of as a real ace or top-end starter. But I mean, this guy's been as good as it gets this year, Matt. Yusei Kikuchi, he's my favorite overall pitcher on the slate. Is it crazy to be playing Yusei Kikuchi in about half my lineups when he is at what appears to be a ceiling price point, but a good matchup against the Chicago White Sox?
Well, I'm playing 3 lineups and playing him in all of them. So no,
Okay.
I do not think that is crazy. It's not even about Kikuchi himself. It's about the rest of the slate. Like, you got to eat some chalk somewhere because those are obviously the best plays. And again, White Sox throwing a ton of righties at Kikuchi here. I don't love the spot, but they're still not a good offense. As you said, he's been fantastic this year. And I'm also with you. The ownership should be flipped with him and Schmidt. And I think the discrepancy is even bigger when all is said and done. So yeah, I like Kikuchi a lot, and I like his the opposing arm there, Crochet.
Yeah, so let's talk about Zach Crochet, who is somebody that we have I'm sorry, Garrett Crochet. I think I said Zach Crochet. So Garrett Crochet, somebody who you and I have been rostering as of late, and the field was on him for a little bit. It was weird. Like, he was really popular. Then he had really good underlying stats, but his ERA was high. So people just stopped playing him. And then you and I were playing him again. And then he has a couple of good starts and he's like, hey, this Crochet guy is pretty good. Starts to become popular again. But now we've seen decreased ownership from, which I think isn't because people are out on Crochet at this point. It's really just because of his price tag and the way the slate sets up. And then also combined with the fact that he's got, a pretty tough matchup. We've got Crochet today pitching against the Toronto Blue Jays. So all those things kind of being put together, him being the most expensive pitcher on the slate, it's led to him being less popular. So Crochet, it seems like he's somebody really like as a pivot play on the high end.
I do. Again, I hate the spot. On a lot of slates, I wouldn't even think about Crochet here, but for my money, as good as Kikuchi's been, Crochet's been the best pitcher on the slate. He's arguably been a top 5 pitcher in baseball this year. Toronto doesn't strike out against left-handed pitching. They're obviously set up to crush lefties, so I think there's a real floor here with Crochet, a floor like we saw against the Phillies where he gave up a bunch of home runs, but that's not what I expect. And I think he's a guy that kind of undermines or, doesn't, you can disregard the strikeouts that the opposing team against left-handed pitching just a little bit because he's so good. He's not your average left-handed pitcher is all I'm trying to say. So yeah, I just like him a lot considering the ownership. I think I'm going to build differently from the field tonight, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, he's only projected for 11% ownership. How about the other pay-up options? So we've got Kyle Bradish at 7% ownership, pitching against the St. Louis Cardinals. We've got Christian Javier is 8% owned, pitching against the Angels. And then a really tough matchup for Brian Wu, $8,500 against the Yankees. Brian Wu, he seems to only pitch in the easiest matchups ever. So it's good to see Brian Wu actually get kind of a tough matchup because it's usually Brian Wu, hey, look, he's at home against the A's. He's at home against the White Sox, but actually a difficult matchup for him here against the Yankees. Any of these other pitchers on the high end that you're liking as contrarian options? Because the only ones that are picking up any kind of ownership are Kikuchi and Clark Schmidt.
If Wu were in the cheap pitcher category, he'd be my favorite, but he's not. So it's hard to spend up on him here. Not really in the habit of using right-handers against the Yankees anyways. So No, you can get different with Crochet. So that's where I'm headed.
Sports Guy 24 says, are we being blatant about trying to lower Schmidt's ownership? He's clearly the best play. I think Kikuchi's the best play. I don't have an issue with Clark Schmidt's ownership. I have Clark Schmidt's my second most rostered pitcher. Kikuchi's one for me, but no, I don't think it's ridiculous to think Kikuchi's a slightly better option than Clark Schmidt today.
Yeah, I want Clark Schmidt to be 100% or 99% owned because I'm not playing him and I'm playing Seattle. So no, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's also just kind of hard to find spots to get different at pitcher. Like, I mean, I'll phrase it to you this way. If somebody was building a lineup and absolutely felt like they needed to play one of these guys in the 8K range that wasn't popular, who's the one that you would gravitate towards? Because I actually do have one in mind.
Yeah, it's definitely Javier. He's in the pool for me. I don't love it. He's a roller coaster, but I still am not believing in this Angels squad. And per his top two pitcher percentage, he's not getting enough ownership. So he'd be my guy. How about you?
Yeah, Javier. I guess maybe you can make a case for Charlie Morton just because of leverage. I know the Cubs aren't going to be as popular as the Braves, but I'm kind of surprised the Braves aren't more popular than the Cubs. But the two of them are projected to both be pretty popular, and I do think that the Braves are in a better spot. So if I was building a Brave stack and maybe wanted to get leverage off the Cubs, I think you make a case for Charlie Morton. But yeah, Christian Javier for me against this Angels lineup. And I don't know how the hell the Angels keep putting up runs because they've got just the shittiest lineup on paper. But Javier's numbers this year have been 3.23 ERA, 3.95 expected ERA. The dip in strikeout rate's a little bit of a concern, down to 20.2% when 2 years ago it was 33.2%. But still, I think the matchup against the Angels has enough upside to where if I had to pick one of these guys, I'd be going to Christian Javier to differentiate a lineup.
Yeah, same.
Let's see if there was any questions in Discord. One of the perks of having a Stochastic membership is you do get access to our Discord channel. You could ask us questions whenever you want. And hey, I'm Drew95 in here did ask us, what are our thoughts on Christian Javier? And yeah, I mean, my thoughts on Javier are don't play him. I know, hey, I'm Drew is usually playing in cash games. Certainly wouldn't play him in cash games today. For tournaments, he's a pretty reasonable way to differentiate an otherwise popular lineup, though.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, let's look at the FanDuel pitchers now. Over on the FanDuel side of things, and I'll refresh ownership here to see what it is that's standing out. Make sure I've got the most recent numbers. All right, so we've got two really popular pitchers on FanDuel. Clark Schmidt on the high end is 22% owned. Aaron Brooks on the low end is 25.6% owned. So let's talk about the high-end pitching, Matt, where if you're going to be going to Clark Schmidt, that's kind of I'm surprised he's this much more popular than Yusei Kikuchi and Crochet as well to some extent. Like, I understand Crochet not being as popular as these guys, but I mean, relative to ownership, give me Yusei Kikuchi at 12% owned on FanDuel as my top pay-up option. I know you talked about liking Crochet. He's only 3% owned. So which way would you go on FanDuel if you're paying up for a pitcher?
The win equity is worth more on FanDuel, so probably lean Kikuchi there, but I got no problem with either guy.
Yeah, I'm going to go Kikuchi just because of the ownership that we're getting relative to Schmidt, because I don't really think there's that big of a gap between them. And my preference, like I said before, is slightly towards Yusei Kikuchi. So being able to get him at half of the ownership of Clark Schmidt, sign me up for that. As far as cash games, though, I guess just align yourself with a field and go with Clark Schmidt and all the popularity. It's hard for me to get behind Aaron Brooks as a cash game option on a single pitcher site. He is going to be so popular on FanDuel, though, 26% ownership. What do you make of all the field going to Aaron Brooks for cheap over on FanDuel? Because, I mean, that's a very big ownership mark on him.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe how high he is in the tools, which is making me rethink all my life's decisions because he's not good. So, like, I know the matchup in the ballpark is good, but this is just a casualty of the slate where people want to spend up. There are no real good pitching options. He's the only viable cheap guy. Like, I just can't do it. So I see this with you. Like, I wouldn't play Brooks in cash, but again, I don't think you're crazy to because of the ownership and because of the bats it allows you to get.
4.95 ERA in AAA for Aaron Brooks last year, 5.43 FIP. The year before in AAA, he had a 5.56 ERA, 4.58 FIP. made a few appearances in the big leagues in 2022. He had a 7.71 ERA, a 10.18 expected ERA. I mean, Aaron Brooks, I remember his last start, we're stacking against him. He pitched against the Astros, and we were just making jokes about, oh, he's the Aaron Brooks from the Houston Rockets.
Yes.
He's the Aaron Brooks who played for the New Orleans Saints. And who would have thought 5 days ago that we'd be talking about Aaron Brooks as being uber chalk just one slate later?
It's crazy. Like, it's just crazy. And again, I understand why it's happening, but these are the type of pitchers that we really like to pick on. So that's kind of a segue into our stacks when we get there.
If you were looking to get Contrarian on FanDuel and be cheap, who would be the pivot off of Aaron Brooks? Because while he is 26% owned, nobody else on the low end is picking up any kind of ownership. The reason Cal Quantrill isn't popular on FanDuel like he is on DraftKings is because he's $8,600 on FanDuel, which is, I mean, that's just like a ridiculous price for Cal Quantrill. I mean, he could be pitching against, a high school team or something like that. I'd be like, really? This $8,600 for Cal Quantrill? Is there anybody you like as a pivot for cheap off of Aaron Brooks?
I think it's kind of the same as on DK, where I don't really like any one guy in particular, but they're all just not Aaron Brooks. So Mize, Wu, and Canning. The difference on FanDuel is, like I've said this a couple times, the pricing is more condensed and there aren't as many options like you just mentioned with Quantrill, et cetera. So that's why Brooks is getting so much love even on a one pitcher site.
It's a shitty matchup, but if I'm punting on FanDuel, Lance Lynn, 4% owned, $6,800. The only pitcher on FanDuel that's cheaper than Aaron Brooks. And we do have kind of comparable projections on them. Aaron Brooks, a 7% chance to be the top scoring pitcher. Lance Lynn, 5.7% chance. We actually have Lance Lynn with a better chance being the top value pitcher on FanDuel than Aaron Brooks does. So I don't love it. He's pitching against the Orioles. Lance Lynn hasn't been able to get lefties out for a considerable amount of time. But, I mean, is Aaron Brooks really going to outscore Lance Lynn 6-1, the difference in their ownership? I don't think that's all. If this slate played out 6 times, 7 times, I think Lance Lynn outscores Aaron Brooks more than one of those times.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I don't even like Lynn at all, especially in this spot. But again, he's not a chalky Aaron Brooks. So we see this the same.
All right. If you guys haven't done yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and let's go ahead and look at some lineups in the lineup generator here, Mike. If you wouldn't mind, let's build some lineups on DraftKings as well as FanDuel, and let's try contrarian settings. I think that even contrarian settings are just going to jam that Wrigley Field game in for us, but I'm interested to see if we do make contrarian lineups, what makes those lineups contrarian? Like, is there going to be some lower owned pitchers we get to? Is there going to be lower owned secondary stacks? Or is it just going to say to us that, hey, it's kind of impossible to make close to contrarian lineups for today, which might be the case. And if you guys want to sign up for this tool, use the link below in the description box. It's less than $15. You get access to Discord, and then also our player projections, ownership projections there and here as well. So let's start with DraftKings, Mike. Let's go all stack types and then go contrarian. Yeah, contrarian lineups. Don't lock anybody in. I'm curious to see. Okay, Braves to start here. Yeah, it's still going to jam the Braves. Maybe we're getting weird shit at pitcher, or there's, like I said, some secondary stacks, because this is just Brave City right here.
Yeah, not surprising given the projected ownership and top stack percentage we have on Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta in over half of our lineups. The Cubs are in a third of those lineups. There's the Orioles, though. The Orioles are not too popular, 7% owned. So it is a team that actually rates out very well in the top stacks tool. We've got the Baltimore Orioles, 7% ownership, 10.8% chance to be the top scoring team. For reference, I mean, the Braves are so far ahead of every other team. But for reference, the Orioles relative to the Cubs, we've got the Cubs with 12.7% projected ownership, the Orioles at 7% projected ownership, but the Orioles do have higher top stack odds. The Cubs are quite a bit cheaper, which does make them easier to stack up, but the Orioles do look like a team. If you were trying to make a contrarian stack, I don't think the Orioles are a bad team to be getting to, which is what the contest, the lineup generator is giving us some lineups of here, Matt. What do you make of the Orioles as a team that have, comparable top stack odds to teams that are not the Braves, but not quite the same ownership?
Yeah, I'm always interested in Baltimore, especially against guys that struggle with lefty bats like Lance Lynn does. Great hitting weather here. Baltimore looks elite. If you do want to play those chalky cheap pitchers, I think Baltimore is a great place to go to get different from the Braves and Cubs of the world. They're more expensive, but not hard to fit if you use one of those cheap pitchers. Here's a question for you, because we were talking before the show about Atlanta's ownership. Remember, and I'm going to tie this back to Aaron Brooks. Remember last week when Brooks was on the slate and Houston came in a lot higher than they were projected to?
Yeah, I think Houston ended up being, I'm going off memory here. I think we had them projected for like high ownership, but nothing crazy. It was just like there's a lot of teams that had comparable ownership, like right around 8-9%. And then by the time we got to lock, I want to say that the Astros, in single entry, the Astros were like 25% owned. But then even in large field tournaments, they were like 15 to 20% owned.
I think we see the exact same thing with the Braves here, but even higher, considering they're already projected for higher ownership. Do you not see it the same way?
No, I think they're going to be more popular, a little bit more popular. Although, all right, I'm going to backtrack on that a little bit. They're projected for 14% ownership as a team. I don't think guys like Zach Short at the end of the lineup are going to be all that popular. So what I think ends up happening is the aggregate ownership probably is the 14.2% mark, but it's going to be because like Matt Olson, Ron Acuna are like 20 something percent owned. And then the guys at the end of the lineup are like 5 to 7% owned. And then just because of the ownership here is the aggregate ownership of the team, it ends up meeting in the middle.
I agree, but I think it's going to just be higher than what you said. Like, that's just my opinion. I can't wait to find out, as I was telling you before the show, but I'm not going to be surprised if the top of the Braves lineup is like 40% owned in like the 121 or 253 entry max. You know, a lot of people play with Sims, et cetera, now, and they are just pumping them out.
Yeah. And we are getting questions too about the weather in Baltimore. There is some rain in the forecast. I saw somebody bring it up in the YouTube chat. Monkey Prick brought it up here in the Discord chat, and that's his name in Discord. I'm not calling anybody names or anything like that. This is a man. He calls himself Monkey Prick. Is that a concern for you at all? The weather in Baltimore. There's some rain in the forecast.
Slight, but not really. I'm not interested in the pitchers there, which I think would be the big concern. So not really. I mean, I might not play this game, but not because of weather.
Yeah, I like the Orioles bats. There could be a rain delay in the middle, but I'm not like I think Lance Lynn, if you guys are playing a bunch of lineups, he's a reasonable contrarian option to be getting to, but I'm not too I think the most likely outcome is the game plays. Maybe there's late rain and they have to go into a delay or something like that, or maybe the game gets called early, but it's something that for tournament purposes, I'm okay with. There's nothing I would touch here in a cash game, though. But for people like Flex in the chat says, damn, he liked the Orioles. If you really like the Orioles bats, I don't think you have to abort on them or anything.
Totally with you.
And go back to the lineup generator there, Mike. I want to see the pitchers that we were getting to. All right, so the pitchers, yeah, we've got Clark Schmidt there. Aaron Brooks right around in line with the field, in line with Yusei Kikuchi. Yeah, and here are some of the contrarian pitchers. Like we've got Kyle Bradish showing up in some lineups. Actually, that is a pitcher in that Orioles Cardinals game. So if you guys want to just totally avoid any risk, maybe don't play him there. But look, even using the contrarian settings that we have here in the lineup generator, the thing is still lineup generator is only going to give you lineups that we do have projected to be plus EV in our simulations. And here's the reality. Sometimes there are not low owned lineups that project to be particularly plus EV lineups. So it's still just giving us a lot of the chalky hitters as well as the chalky pitchers on the slate. But Matt, I'm curious to ask you, what are you going to be doing in single entry tonight on DraftKings? And then I'll tell you what I'm going to do. And then we'll check out some FanDuel lineups in the lineup generator. Because what are we doing with single entry today when clearly the Atlanta Braves, Chicago Cubs are in the best hitting environment, but we may see 30 to 40% owned, if not even higher, Brave stacks in single entry?
Yeah, again, I said at the beginning that this could easily turn out to be the type of spot where no matter how high the Braves are owned, it's not high enough because of the weather. Assad is kind of getting by with smoke and mirrors, just faced this Atlanta team. But the ownership is going to be crazy, in my opinion. So I'm not going to be playing them there. I like picking on the popular pitchers. And again, the way I'm playing is not going to work out all that often. But when it does, obviously a much cleaner route to the top. So I'm not going to be playing the Braves except for as like one-offs, mini stacks, but I'm not prioritizing five man from them in single entry. How about you?
1 sec. Because there is rain expected in St. Louis. I don't know, like not saying like guaranteed. There's a chance of rain in St. Louis. So I'm trying to figure out. Flex had said this has nothing to do with the weather, and then Benny Hernandez says, "Am I tripping, or is the game not in St. Louis?" The game's in St. Louis, isn't it?
Yeah, you're tripping.
Yeah. Am I having an aneurysm here? Let me double check this.
No, it is.
MLB
The guy is tripping.
Yeah, games in St. Louis. There's some chance of rain, but nothing like it's a little bit of risk. It's nothing that's making me jump off. But maybe I misspoke for it. So the game was in Baltimore, but I don't think so. I don't know. Either way, yeah, there is some weather risk there. But anyway, if we go back and Flex said it was an inside joke with him and Sean. All right, so I missed it. I missed some of the context there in chat. Missed something there. Anyway, back to the spots on the slate. What was the question you were asking me again?
Who are you going to play?
Okay, so one other part that I want to ask you about this. If we're expecting the Braves ownership to just be crazy high, are the Cubs going to be not all that popular in single entry potentially?
So it's the opposite with the Cubs, what you said about the Braves. The top of the Braves lineup is going to be really popular. And to fit them, guys like Dansby Swanson in the 8-hole, 2,800 is going to be very popular. So I think the expensive Cubs aren't low owned, but are considerably lower than the Braves guys. That said, there's enough cheap pitching where you can kind of just fit it all. So no, I don't think the Cubs are going to be like low owned by any means. I think that the teams around them are going to be lower owned. Detroit, Houston, the Dodgers, the Yankees, all those other teams, in my opinion, are going to be lower owned than what we're projecting.
So I'll tell you what I'm doing in single entry, and it is stacking the Colorado Rockies. So they've got a matchup here against Aaron Brooks, and I think Aaron Brooks is going to be more popular than Cal Quantrill. Fair to say, or do you think it goes Cal Quantrill?
Oh, I'm right there with you with Brooks, and I'm also stacking Colorado, so say your piece.
Okay. So I think that we're going to see insane ownership on Aaron Brooks in single entry for two reasons. First off, if we are anticipating that the Braves are going to be just crazy popular in single entry, and especially Ronald Acuna, Matt Olson, then what happens? There has to be more popularity to the cheap pitchers and less popularity to the expensive pitchers. If we are going to see more ownership going to the cheap pitchers with the field gravitating towards the Atlanta Braves, then that means Yusei Kikuchi's ownership comes down a little bit. I think Clark Schmidt still stays about the same because he's not all that popular. So I still think we get like the 40-ish% owned Clark Schmidt. But I think then Aaron Brooks and Cal Quantrill both get a little bit more popular, with Aaron Brooks really getting popular. This Aaron Brooks, who's gotten hit around in AAA, might legitimately be 50% owned in single entry today. And I don't think he's all that much better than the Colorado Rockies. As shitty as the Rockies are, I still think they're better than a AAA offense. And we've already seen Aaron Brooks struggle in AAA. So, like, large field tournaments, yeah, for the salary savings, I'm willing to have some shares of Brooks. But in single entry, one thing that does stand out to me that I was bringing up to you before we were doing the show here, Matt, is I run everything through the Sims and it just jams that Wrigley Field game for me, and it gives me just a ton of the Atlanta Braves. What is interesting is my individual lineups that have the highest Sim ROI are not the Atlanta Braves stacks. My top projected lineups, it is number one, a Colorado Rockies stack. My second one here is a Mariners stack. My third highest projected Sim ROI lineup, it's an Oakland A's stack. Fourth is the Cubs. Then I'm getting to see more of the Braves lineups come in, but then still towards the top of, if I'm looking at not my top 150 lineups, but like my top 10 lineups, then it's like a couple Braves stacks, a couple Cubs, a couple Mariners. And that's where I'm seeing some of the leverage of like the individual best projected lineups. So I am landing on the Colorado Rockies for single entry. It's most likely not going to go well, just like playing Ryan Weathers last night. Should not have gone well, but at the times it does go well, you really have a chance to differentiate some lineups. So give me the Colorado Rockies to get me on an entirely different build than the field in single entry.
Yeah, I'm playing the Rockies and the Mariners. So I like the Rockies more because I don't think Brooks is any good and he's getting a ton of ownership. But Schmidt is going to be even more popular. He's so cheap for this matchup. I could see him being like 60% owned in the higher dollar stuff. And his underlines aren't nearly as good as his actual numbers. I like the way this Seattle lineup sets up against him. And while I said I like Colorado more than the Mariners because Brooks isn't good, there's no doubt in my mind Seattle has higher upside because they're just a much better lineup. So playing the ownership game, and we've done shows long enough where I don't always play like this. I don't always just go out of my way to stack against the most popular pitchers. But when they're guys like this, mostly talking about Aaron Brooks there, and then Schmidt, who's only getting so much ownership because of the slate and his price tag, these are the guys I like to pick on.
Yep, I'm on the same page. So I'm going to be stacking against Aaron Brooks in single entry. And then as far as large field tournaments are concerned, let's see, what is my Rockies exposure? It's not all that high. It's higher than the field, though. So like across my top 150 lineups, I have about 6% Rockies stacks. For the A's, I have a little bit less, but still I'm overweight to the field on these teams for large field tournaments. It doesn't take all that much to get overweight to them. They're 3% owned, something like that. The A's 4%. Yeah, the Rockies are 2.5% owned. So I mean, they're 2.5% owned. They have 3.5% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate, and they're going up a pitcher in Aaron Brooks who's not all that great and is going to be over 30% owned. So the Rockies are an uncomfortable play, but one that I think still makes sense to be overweight to. Anything else you want to add on that? If not, we'll build some lineups for FanDuel in the lineup generator.
No, to your point, I also like Oakland, but they have slightly smaller top stack percentage and they're like double the ownership. So I was talking to Lofty about that this morning. It doesn't really matter. Like Oakland is still going to be low owned. So I'm not playing Colorado over Oakland because of that ownership difference. I just like the spot for Colorado better. Guaranteed the 9 at bats. Quantrill isn't good, but he's not a complete gas can, which I think Brooks is. So give me the Colorado side, even though I like Oakland. Let's build some lineups.
All right, Mike, let's go back to the lineup generator. We'll build lineups for the FanDuel side of things now. And let's try to do the same deal. Let's try to build contrarian lineups and see if it is possible to get some stacks on FanDuel that are not the uber chalk. I'm skeptical, but maybe that'll end up being the case that we could do it. So don't lock anything in there. Now let's save this stuff. I also want to let you guys know we do have best ball projections up on the site Stochastic. They are totally free. So that's it. Totally free. Not going to charge you anything. All you have to do is make a free account on the site. Gajeski has got projections up for best ball. There's rankings. So you can see how many fantasy points we've got every player projected for. There's the rankings included with that. And then we also have a CSV upload there. So if you want to, you could download those rankings and you could upload them directly to Drafters, to Underdog, to DraftKings. And then our rankings, they'll show up when you go into the lobby and you're ranking your teams. They're totally free. So if you guys are playing best ball this year, go ahead and check it out. And we're not making this free because we think it's a bad product or anything like that. We really, really do think that we have the best ball projections that are out there. But it's a very popular space that a lot of people are doing a lot of content for, and a lot of people have projections out. And we want to also give ourselves a footing in the space because we haven't really done that much year-long stuff before. So come check out our stuff. It's free. It's likely not going to be free next year. We want to give you guys a taste of what it is that we're planning to do for best ball going forward. And also we're going to have a bunch of free content with it as well. But let's check out the FanDuel lineups now. All right. So, yeah, shit ton of Braves again. Looks like they are in about half of our lineups. Pitchers, Clark Schmidt. Keep scrolling down, Mike. I want to see what pitchers we have outside of Clark Schmidt. All right, Kikuchi. So we're overweight to Kikuchi. Underweight to Aaron Brooks a little bit. And some Lance Lynn there. All right, go to stack exposures. This is just going to be nothing but Braves. It's a lot of Braves, but also some Houston Astros, Chicago Cubs, Baltimore Orioles. Matt, if you're playing a single entry lineup on FanDuel right now, who'd be the one team that you'd be looking to stack on FanDuel?
The thing is about the Braves is they're much higher owned projected wise on FanDuel because they're a lot cheaper. So have to kind of, take that with a grain of salt, I guess. If I were stacking one team in single entry on FanDuel, It's Colorado. I mean, against that Brooks ownership, yeah, it's still Colorado for me. How about you?
Let's see. Just refreshing to make sure I'm looking at the most updated ownership here. And I see we got a FanDuel question from Alex Kaiser in the Discord chat as well, but let's see. I think I'd actually go to the Orioles over on FanDuel. They're only 5% owned. They're our most positively leveraged stack. I know you're not getting the leverage in the same way against Aaron Brooks, but I do wonder if, at least in single entry on FanDuel, just because the pricing is so easy there, that people will gravitate more towards Clark Schmidt and not feel like they have to jam Aaron Brooks. I'm gonna say
Maybe.
Baltimore Orioles. Baltimore Orioles against Lance Lynn. We've got them with 10% overall top stack odds, 5.5% projected ownership. Give me the Orioles in single entry on FanDuel. And let's see what Alex Kaiser has to say. He is saying, for a FanDuel GPP, stacking the O's. Hey, I like the question. I like the question already. He wants to know, should he pitch Brooks with Mullins or pitch Wu with Stowers?
I mean,
if
it
you're
depends what you're
playing
going
the
for.
Baltimore Orioles on FanDuel, the ownership on Aaron Brooks is a little bit less of a concern. Just playing the Orioles, they're already really contrarian. What's Wu? Wu is Wu's $7,800 on FanDuel. Well, I just don't want to stack. I just don't want to roster a pitcher against the Yankees lineup, especially in New York. Yeah, I lean towards Aaron Brooks over Brian Wu over on FanDuel.
I get it. I'm still going to say Wu because I just can't see myself playing a popular Aaron Brooks under any condition. And obviously, it's a tougher spot for Wu, but he's just a much better pitcher. So I'm going to say Wu.
You know what? I'll agree with you. I hate the matchup, but I mean, Wu is infinitely more talented than Aaron Brooks. I would be here's how bad I think Aaron Brooks is, despite the fact that I'm playing him some in large field tournaments. I would honestly be really surprised if he's in the big leagues ever again after the season.
Yeah, same. I was going to say I'd be surprised if he's in the big leagues 2 months from now.
Yeah, I could see him being like a long reliever or something like that. But yeah, I mean, that's probably the most likely scenario, is that he's not big league bound for a long time. And he's got a career, and he's made 53 appearances in his career. He's been around on and off since, I mean, he's been in the minor league since 2011. His big league numbers for his career: 6.45 ERA, 5.27 FIP. Yeah, Alex, go with Wu. Go with Wu instead of Brooks in that lineup. Let's do it. Let's grow some balls. I'm gonna agree with Matt. Let's do it. All right, let's get back to talking about stacks, Matt. And we've talked a lot about, single entry, but what do you make of the Braves in large field tournaments? Because as far as large field tournaments are concerned, where the ownership gets a little bit more spread out, I've got Brave stacks in 55% of my lineups today.
This is a classic. We talk about this a lot. And I mentioned this morning with Lofty. Like in single entry, 4 entry, 3 entry max type stuff, the ownership is going to be a lot higher than what we're projecting. But in the like flagship $18, where people are much more apt to get different, it'll be more in line with what we're projecting. And in that case, they look like by far the best stack on the board. So 100% with you here.
And then on the flip side, what do you make of the Chicago Cubs on the other side of this game? Because all the popularity that's going to the Atlanta Braves, it's also kind of comparable to the Cubs. I mean, it's obviously the same hitting environment. They've got a good, not as good of an offense as the Braves, but still a very good offense. They also got a more difficult matchup because Charlie Morton's on the mound for Atlanta. If he's generating, the win doesn't matter if guys are striking out, what Charlie Morton is capable of doing. So I like the Chicago Cubs. I'm getting exposure. It's just not nearly the amount of ownership that I'm getting to the Atlanta Braves. So what do you make of the Cubs on the other side of the game in the same hitting environment?
It's funny. This exact game played last week in Atlanta, and I played some Cubs against Morton because they were going to be so low owned, and they came through for me. Today, it's like the opposite. Because of the weather, they're going to be really popular, and it's just not a spot for me. I get it. Their lineup is a lot better right now. They got all their guys back. Suzuki, Bellinger's back. Nico Horner's back. Talked about a cheat Dansby Swanson. He's back. But I don't really want to pick on Morton with a popular stack just because the wind's blowing out. And again, we might not see another weather game like this all year, and I could be just not giving it enough credit for how much it's going to impact the game. But it's still baseball. Morton strikes guys out. Assad is a ground ball pitcher. So there are certainly ways where this doesn't work out. And I'm going to hope those ways happen tonight. So I'm not going to be playing Cubs personally.
Yeah, single entry, not really consideration for me. Large field tournaments, it is my second most roster team, just nowhere near the exposure that I get to the Atlanta Braves, though. What are the other stacks that stand out to you as being potential ones that the field should be getting to in large field tournaments?
Seattle, given Clark Schmidt's ownership, like Seattle strikes out a ton, but their lineup is good with upside, bunch of lefties here, massive ballpark upgrade. So I'm going to say Seattle. And then I'm also going to say the Dodgers and Yankees because those teams clearly aren't as likely to go off as the Braves are here, given their top stack percentages, the weather, all that. But the Dodgers and Yankees have been better than the Braves this year. Both those offenses are elite. As much as I said I'd play Woo over Aaron Brooks, that was just because he's not Aaron Brooks. The Yankees have been crushing everyone recently. No reason why they couldn't do the same against Woo. Same with the Dodgers. I'm a Brandon Pfaadt fan. I don't think he's the craziest play in the world tonight on DraftKings at 7,100, but got to give the Dodgers credit where credit's due and recognize how good their offense is. So those two teams, I think I'd be over the field on if I were playing 150.
We've got a Monkey Prick in chat wants to know any particular reason that we don't love the Baltimore bats. I mean, I like them. I think it seemed to be overweight too. I don't want to make it seem like I don't like them. I think in large field tournaments, though, it's hard to not like the Atlanta Braves far more than every other offense. I do think the Orioles there seem to be overweight too, though.
Yeah, completely agree. The Orioles look very, very good here.
And I'll pull up Lance Lynn's splits for his career to make a case for why you would want to be targeting the left-hand hitters for the Baltimore Orioles against Lance Lynn. So the Baltimore Orioles are going up against Lance Lynn, who for his entire career has been pretty elite against right-hand hitters. 283 career WOBA for right-hand hitters going up against Lance Lynn, but 335 for lefties. So there's such a big gap where Lance Lynn has really been successful against right-hand hitters for his career and then just gets killed by lefties. We want to know how that ends up turning out in some of the underlying numbers. The expected ERA for Lance Lynn against righties for his career is 3.07. It's 4.68 against lefties. And also, you look at his strikeout numbers, 20, and this is his entire career. So not even looking at like just this year's sample size. For his career, 27.7% strikeout rate against righties, 19.5% against lefties. Is there anybody you could think of, Matt, who has like a significant sample size that is this kind of splits as a pitcher? Because he's a guy who's like all-star caliber against righties, but legitimately can't get lefties out.
No, I can't. When you think of guys with massive splits, you think of Lance Lynn.
Yeah. So, Baltimore, definitely worth stacking their Monkey Prick, but I think what you should be doing is targeting the lefties in the lineup, which, I mean, there's a good amount of them. I'll pull up the lineup right here, and we've got, let's see. I mean, Adley Rutschman's a switch hitter. Gunnar Henderson's a lefty. Ryan O'Hearn's a lefty. Cedric Mullins is a lefty. Kyle Stowers is a lefty. Colton Cowser is a lefty. So I'd focus on all of those guys. I'd be less inclined to play Ryan Mountcastle, Jordan Westberg, Jorge Mateo, whatever. He's at the end of the lineup, 9-hitter. We don't really expect a ton from him anyway. If he gets on base once, Jorge Mateo is very live to steal bases. But Mountcastle, Westberg, those are the lower priorities for me, or even guys I wouldn't even necessarily want to have in Orioles stacks, considering that they're $4,600 and $4,900 in both righties going up against Lance Lynn. Anything else that stands out to you at offense here, Matt? If not, we could give some time back and do our home run picks.
Yeah, no. And the only thing I'd say about the guys you mentioned in Baltimore, and just interested to get your feedback like on this counterpoint. Yeah, the lefties certainly look better. And like those are the guys you'd want to prioritize. But like if you're stacking the Orioles, you're expecting them to get to Lynn. And then guys like Mountcastle and I don't even remember who else it was, like become appealing. Like I wouldn't cross those guys out personally. I just wouldn't prioritize them, if that makes sense. Does it to you?
Yeah, it's not like crossing them out. It's just you got a lot of lefties in the lineup, and like those are
Sure.
what I want to be targeting against Lance Lynn.
That's fair. Yeah. You got a home run call?
Yeah, let me go ahead and we'll do let's treat the Wrigley game like Coors Field today. You're cheating if you pick a home run for this game. And also, people in chat, join along. Let us know who it is that you guys are picking to go long tonight and give us your dong of the day. Yesterday, I went with Devers yesterday. He ended up homering. Nobody gives a shit what Eric's pick was. I don't remember. It wasn't very memorable, but I did hit my home run pick yesterday with Rafael Devers. Let's see for today. All right, so it can't be anybody. Well, like all my most rostered hitters are from that Atlanta-Chicago game. So let's scroll down. Boy, I have to go really far down. You know what? I know what I'm going to do here. I know who I'm picking. And also, I can't, even though I'm playing them in single entry, I can't pick the Rockies guys today. It's just too unrealistic to pick any of those guys to homer today. I'm going to go with Gunnar Henderson against Lance Lynn. I mean, Gunnar Henderson, he is the league leader in home runs so far this year. He's got a matchup against Lance Lynn, who we just talked about, has gotten nuked by lefties over the course of his career. Gunnar Henderson, I think he's definitely the most likely hitter to homer from not only this game, but I think on the entire slate outside of the players that are playing Wrigley.
So I'm with you. I think he's homered in like 5 straight games. So that's obviously a good pick. Interesting to me, in our top hitter tool, you can arrange it by home run percentage. Matt Olson is number 1 with a 33.27% chance of homering. Number 2 is Yainer Diaz off of Griffin Canning. So I'm not choosing him, but I think he's really sneaky for DFS. I'm going with Julio Rodriguez.
Oh, by the way, also Julio Rodriguez, plus 600 a homer over on FanDuel. So we did it's a Dinger Tuesday on FanDuel, where if you opt into the thing, and then it's like, if you bet on a player to homer, not only if they homer, but every single player in that game, total homers that are accounted for in that game, you like a $5 bonus bet on anybody that ends up homering there. So Julio Rodriguez was my FanDuel pick, plus 600. So getting pretty good odds on that as well. So we're a little bit aligned there. And let's see what we have in the chat for chat's picks. We've got Dub K123. He's going with Yordan Alvarez. We've got BD says Mountcastle against lefty. Well, Mountcastle isn't going up against a lefty today. But EMAC has got Anthony Santander. We've got Francisco Rubio. He's asking 1v1 for pitchers. You want to know Bradish or Javier? Javier over Bradish for me. Junior Whopper's going with Salvador Perez. Malukar's going with Colt Keith. Andy Melman's going with Bellinger. Cheater. We're not allowed to do that crazy win game where somebody's going to hit a pop-up and just going to blow out of the stadium. But yeah, Bellinger's fairly likely to homer. Michael Roundtree going with Colton Cowser. BD going with Adley Rutschman. Michael Harmon going Gunnar Henderson, just like myself, saying Gunnar Henderson going for a 5th straight homer today. Casey Leatherwood's picking 2 homers. Cowser and Bregman. Skittle's going with Kyle Tucker. Tucker is quiet, maybe not quietly anymore. Have you looked at the numbers on Kyle Tucker this year? Every time I look at the Houston Astros game, one of 2 things has happened. Kyle Tucker's either just homered or he's stolen a base. Every single time I look at the Astros box score, he's now first in all of baseball in wins above replacement. Ahead of Mookie Betts, ahead of Juan Soto, ahead of Shohei Ohtani. He's been killing it this year. Kyle Tucker, I like that. Francisco Rubio's going with Canzone. That damn dingo's got Ryan O'Hearn. CJ the Great also has got Ryan O'Hearn. Then Benny Levine there's got Schneider. Ken Ratty also is going with Gunnar Henderson. Aaron Davis, Danny Jensen. That's a little bit contrarian there. And then Sotex is going with Freddie Freeman. So that has it for us today, guys. Thank you for contributing with your home run picks. If you want to sign up for any package that's stochastic, sign up using the links that we have below. Also gets you access to Discord, so you can ask us questions whenever you want. Other than that, guys, like, subscribe, all that stuff you haven't already. 30 minutes from now, I'm going to be doing NBA Live Before Lock with Eric Lindquist. And then I'll stick around. I'll watch some of the basketball game with you guys on playback after that. So see you guys in about 30 minutes. Other than that, have a great night. Peace out. Good luck with your baseball lineup.